and welcome back to the More Money Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Morehouse. Welcome back to the show. This is season 17 of the podcast, and we just surpassed 8 years back in June, which is incredible. So for anyone who's been listening since season 1, thank you so much for your continued attention and loyalty. That is wild. And for anyone who's new to the podcast and started in the first season, I'm sorry. I am sorry that it's, I was just learning how to podcast and, things have gotten better. If you go, I'd say past year 6 or year 7, it's a different ball game. I know a lot more. Anywho, I have an amazing season for you, some amazing guests, and I'm almost done recording all of my episodes, which I'm so proud of being very, I started gathering guests in August and I got them pretty quickly. Maybe I was just motivated because I also am still working on my book. The book is not done, guys. I'm still working on it. And I wanted to make sure that I had an incredible podcast for you and also had enough time to finish this book. And it was also going to be a good book. So I can't wait to share this season, and I'm kicking off this season, the first episode, season premiere, with an amazing guest, someone who I have really, been following and just a fan of for so long. And I was on their podcast, and now they're on my podcast because I was that person who's like, hey, do you want to be on my show? Right after I was on their show. I have Gabe Dunn on the show. They are a writer, actor, filmmaker, stand-up comedian. Oh my gosh, I'm telling you that the resume is very exciting. Host of the YouTube channel and podcast Just Between Us with co-host Allison Raskin, as well as the host of the New Guys podcast with co-host River Butcher. They're also a New York Times bestselling author of I Hate Everyone But You and the author of Bad with Money, which is also a podcast they host. Yes, that is 3 podcasts, making me feel lazy much. Anyways, which we will be really diving into in this episode because I'm a big fan of the book, and it really goes into, Gabe's financial journey, money mistakes they've made along the way, and just some really authentic, raw money talk. Which really, we don't see a lot in the personal finance space. I don't know about you. I'm on social media way too much, an unhealthy amount. And I blame it on having to be on social media for my business. But honestly, most of the stuff that I look at is not business related. But anyways, I am always, seeing stuff on my feed that is so well curated and is really making you just feel like, oh my gosh, am I the only one that feels like this? Am I the only one having a hard time with, managing my day-to-day expenses? Am I the only one who has financial anxiety? Because it looks like everyone online is making 6 figures a month by affiliate marketing. Is it just me that gets those things in my feed? I don't know. I get them a lot for whatever reason, probably because I hate watch them. Anyways, so I have Gabe on the show. It is a real treat. You're going to love this episode. So let's get to it. But before I get to that interview, I want to share a little bit more information about my online course that you may not even know about, but it's been around for almost 3 years, called Wealth Building Blueprint for Canadians. It's a course I built specifically with you Canadian listeners in mind who want to learn how to do passive investing like I've been talking about for years on the show. If you want to get rich slowly, invest for the long term, you don't want to day trade or dabble in something speculative like cryptocurrency or some hot stocks that you find online. You just want to make sure you can retire one day or, save enough for buying a home. And this course can help you. It is specifically about all the fundamentals you need to know about investing as a Canadian, but then I also show you how to build a strategic investment plan and then how to invest in your own portfolio by way of either using a robo-advisor or doing it on your own from scratch. There's lots of worksheets and calculators and spreadsheets that you will not find anywhere else on the internet, hence why I had to build them myself, but also get lifetime access as well as access to the private Facebook group, my monthly Q&A sessions for students, a private email you can contact me with, and you also get a private one-on-one session with me when you finish the course as well. There are so many benefits to the course, so I highly recommend going to jessicamorehouse.com/course to find more information and to apply. Again, that's jessicamorehouse.com/course to learn more and to apply. Welcome, Gabe, to the More Money Podcast. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Nice to
You're
see
so
you
welcome.
again.
Yeah, nice to see you again. It was such a treat to be on your podcast talking about the difference between the US and Canada in finance. So I'm thrilled to have you on the show to talk more about you, your amazing book, Bad with Money, and just what's been going on since you released the book. A lot has happened. I also just listened to your the just dropped podcast episode about what you're dealing with.
Oh,
right
yeah.
now. So there you go. What I think is so great about you is you're very honest and real and unfiltered. And I think that's not what you see often in personal finance. It's all through a filter lens of, look at me, I'm perfect.
Well, thanks.
And that's really just not the reality of
Thank you. I feel horrible. I've been so stressed out since it dropped, so stressed out.
I am so sorry. I literally was like, how can I help? Do I know someone who's a lawyer that will work pro bono? I don't. Oh my gosh.
I know.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I hear you. That's not fun.
No.
But I know. But so what I absolutely loved right in the get-go of your book was you taught, and again, I don't see this a lot in lots of books. You talked about your kind of family background and how, growing up in a certain way with your parents and how they managed money and talked about money and thought about money, how that had a huge impact on you then managing money as an adult and probably still today. I'm very influenced by my parents. Everyone's very influenced by the environment that they grew up in. And it is hard to sometimes learn and unlearn things. So I wanted to kind of start there because I know your book is Bad with Money, which sounds like you need to be nicer to yourself. But I think part of it is that is a common saying that I hear people say. I'm like, oh, I'm just bad with money. So do you want to kind of share when you had to start making some financial decisions for yourself? And I guess that really started when you were planning on going to college. What was kind of the reality of the situation? You're like, oh, there's some costs involved, and which college should I go to, and all that kind of stuff.
I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about money. I didn't know any that loans would have to be taken out, that they would be X amount of loans, that there was a chance you wouldn't be able to pay them back right away. I was gay in Florida, which now everyone sees as bad, but at the time nobody really.
Florida's had a change.
I mean, it wasn't great back then. So this was the 2006 is when I graduated high school, and it wasn't great for gay stuff. I wasn't out or anything, and so I knew that I wanted to leave Florida and I wanted to go to a city in the Northeast. And I also wanted to study journalism, and there was a program in Florida called Bright Futures where I could have gone to University of Florida for essentially free, but I was so nervous about being gay in Florida and not being able to come out. And I was so nervous about the prestige of where I was going that I really wanted to go to a good quote unquote school. And I got a scholarship to Emerson. And so I decided to go there, also because I didn't get into Northwestern, which was my first choice. But that would have been so expensive. Emerson was expensive, but it was still half tuition, which was good. But I had no concept. Nobody sat me down and said, oh, the loans are going to be X amount, and here's how you could possibly pay them off, and here's what happens if you don't pay them off, and all these things. I talked about in my book that my little sister, when she was 18, she went to go get a neck tattoo. Not irresponsibly, was in honor of a friend who died, but sort of, she was like, I want to get a neck tattoo. And the guy at the tattoo parlor was like, if it's your first tattoo and you're also 18, I'm not tattooing your neck. And that person showed more care for a 18-year-old's future than any lone person ever did. And so I think about that a lot in terms of what we normalize and what we have allowed young people to do. And I think that at least for me, my parents really believe in me, really wanted me to succeed. We don't come from a wealthy background. So to them, they were like, well, you'll be an investment. We'll push you forward. We'll have you go to this good school or whatever. Because I had always done really well academically. And I think they don't want to have negative feelings, I think is what I'm realizing. They love a good time. They love being able to do stuff. They never sort of let they never let us know about money. And then they never sort of let money be an impediment to like things that they wanted to do. So my parents would be very confusing because they would some days be like, hey, let's go out, let's do this, let's get this, you know, like be very spendy. And then the next day they would be like, what have we done? We can't buy anything. This is a disaster.
Yeah.
And then when I, as a kid, would remember, I would say, hey, remember yesterday when we spent all that money? That might be why there's problems now. They would be like, you're a kid, mind your business.
Wow. Yeah.
So it
And
was
you're like,
very confusing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess, did you adopt some of those habits when you were an adult, and sometimes you would just splurge, and then sometimes you would really regret and they'd be really hard on yourself. And then it was kind of just a back and forth of, you know, guilt, shame, but then, oh, treat yourself or like, yeah. Yeah. Cause it's interesting, as I've talked to a lot of people over the past year researching for my book, I've heard a lot of similar stories. And it's just, if you have mixed messages, the lesson you're going to learn is, you know, just mixed. You're not going to have a straightforward path.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I grew up in an addict and an alcoholic home. And I think that also leads to impulsive behavior. You know, I have bipolar disorder. I think that there was a lot of, I still grapple with this. Like, life is short. Who cares? Like, everything, none of this is fair or makes any sense. Or like, I don't want to sit here be doing paperwork my whole life. Like, you know, all of this stuff that would then lead to sort of carelessness. Like with my first job, I didn't check the box for tax deductions or, you know, which like, is that fair that that's a thing that's allowed to happen?
Yeah,
no.
I feel like, at least for any job I've ever had, it was automatic. That was never a choice. And that should not be someone's choice, especially when you're like in your early 20s. Right. And you have no idea what that checkbox means.
And I think like I still do deal with wanting to say fuck it and do whatever I want. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, when you have someone in your life who's an addict, the highs are high and the lows are low. And I thought maybe that I was imagining some stuff. And when I went back to write my book, I went and read my journal from 8th grade. And I didn't really even notice how much in that journal I wrote about money, even though it didn't seem like I was. Like I had entries where I would be like, my mom just took my sister to the mall. They came back with all these bags. I don't know how we're going to afford this. Like they asked me if I wanted to come. I was like, no. And then it became this running joke in my family. Oh, Gabe's like a worrywart. Gabe never wants to go shopping. Gabe never wants to spend anything. Like we would go out with like my aunt and my mom and my sister would buy like 5 things and they'd be like, do you want anything? And I would always be like, no, 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 no. Because I knew that she was getting stuff. Or like even now I grapple with like taking any sort of gifts or money from them because my sister did and my oldest brother did. And I want to be the one who, I'm like calculating in my head, well, they don't have any left for me. So, my sister now has she got promoted. So her job, I think, is much better. She's in a much better place. But yeah, like, I think there was a feeling of like, okay, I'm doing the math here. And I think that I should just kind of bow out of this situation. But that didn't really happen with school. I justified it because I was like, okay, I'm going to school. But I made that decision myself to not engage with it because I just suspected something was wrong.
Mm-hmm. And I know there's a part of your book you talk about you being part of an improv troupe and having a boyfriend. He was the one who said, why do you still have a bank account that's connected to your parents? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people probably have systems that are set up like that. Actually, my younger sister used to. And I'm like, why does mom still have access to your bank account? She never took money out. She would just put money in. But I'm just like, that's kind of weird. Mm-hmm. You're almost 30. Why is that happening? You should be independent.
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting because, having that connection kind of ties you to that place, maybe making it difficult for you to move forward and be more independent. I don't know. What was your experience like? And then you obviously did, get your own bank account.
I think stuff comes with ties. Like my sister is much closer to my parents than I am, I think, because we're different in the sense that like if there was a leak at her apartment, she would call my dad. Mm. Whereas like I always am like, what is he going to do? From miles away, call your landlord.
Yeah.
Like what? But like for a lot of people my age, I see them even, I'm 35. I still see people be like, oh, I got a form in the mail. I'm going to call my mom. And I'm like,
that's weird.
What? But I guess
never.
it's not weird. I guess you have like a good relationship with your parents, and like, that's fine. I have a good relationship with my parents, but like, I just don't call them when I get something in the mail. And my sister, still does. And so, and my co-host, I think my co-host of my podcast, who's my age, a little younger, would still like gets a form and calls her dad. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, I know. And my mom is a lawyer, so there have been like legal things that I've run by her, but not just on the premise of being my mother.
Yeah. It's like, she's a lawyer.
She's a lawyer.
She probably knows this.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think I just, I started realizing that I needed independence, and they didn't really like that at first. And it was a real uphill battle, because when I got my own bank account, they were furious, and they'll probably say they weren't, but they were. And then when I wanted to, what was the other thing I did? Oh, I went on my own phone plan. I removed myself from the family plan.
Sounds logical, They
were mad. And then it started to be when I would go home to visit, I started staying at Airbnbs or hotels instead of staying with them. And that was like a whole rigmarole, like a real problem. And I think sometimes for a lot of people, parents are like, well, as long as we have access to the money, we can control you in some way. As long as we're giving you money or taking money or whatever it is. But then it's like, it's a process, because it's like, okay, part of me is like, if your parents can give you money, just take the money. Like, I get frustrated with friends of mine I get frustrated with friends of mine who I'm like, you're rich, like your parents could just give it to you. But then I'm also like, but I understand sometimes that, like, especially with friends of mine who are queer or trans, it comes with a lot of strings. It comes with, my parents gave me like a little something to pay off a credit card, which I used to really worry about where the money was coming from. I've just stopped asking. Like, if they're doing crimes, they're doing crimes. It's not my business. But
not your problem.
It's not my problem. But or whatever they're up to. I don't know. I used to really worry about what they were up to, and now I'm like, it's none of my business. But they're not doing crimes. But something's weird. But anyway, so they but they did say on the phone, they were like, okay, our caveat is when we text you, you have to write back. And I was like, right. And that's fine. Like, for them.
That's not unreasonable.
No,
but
it's not
that's
unreasonable.
Still a string.
But
it's still like, it's not a gift at that point. Then you're like, well, we're doing this so we get something too. Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes total sense. I mean, I always think about in Gilmore Girls, where she has to go have dinner with her grandparents in order to go to that school. Like, that happens to a lot of people, and like, I get that. And like, of course, like, how do I know if I was a grandparent, I wouldn't be like, well, I want to see the kid I'm paying for, like, I get that. So I don't know. It was really hard to detangle. I think too, and I mentioned this a little bit in the book, I think, is like, we're a Jewish family. And I think with ethnic families, there's a bit of a difference in the idea of the collective, and like, we are a family. This is the family. And so if you like leave, the family plan, or you move away, or you whatever, it's very like, but this is the family.
Yeah, why are you leaving the family? It's like, I'm not leaving the family, just leaving the phone plan.
Yeah, or everything is everybody's. Or like, why, we talk about everything. We do it's very, it was seen when I started to pull away and do my own thing, it was seen as like another me sort of being difficult.
Yeah, and you're like, I just want to grow and do my own thing and explore.
Yeah.
And
I mean, things
see
have
where I can
changed,
go.
definitely. Yeah. Like, things have changed, but in the very beginning, in early 20s, it was very much like, Gabe's a worrywart. Gabe's like doing all this stuff and trying to be independent from us for no reason, and why is Gabe difficult, and that kind of thing, which I think a lot of people have come up against.
Yeah, I think that's really common. And another thing too, I really enjoyed it. It really brought me back to some of the things that, I experienced in my 20s, especially was, when you did that, free internship. And it's becoming less, I think, of a thing now. But back when, I'm only 2 years older than you. I'm like, that was a big thing, free internships. And for me, I'm like, I was telling my husband last night, I'm like, I was never able to do a free internship. I had to pay for school. So my parents let me stay at home for free, but I had to pay for school and pay for everything else myself. I couldn't afford to do a free internship. that was a, kind of a luxury and privilege. And you kind of faced with that. You're like, well, I really want to do this. And it seemed very financially difficult. And the things that you had to do to make it work, just, sell clothes and all this kind of stuff, you realize this really is not fair. And it's just like getting into college. A lot of the people that you went to school with, super smart, couldn't go to college because of the ridiculous cost.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was a really important thing that you mentioned in your book, is just like, it isn't the same playing field for everybody. And there's systems that are keeping the rich and the poor where they need to be.
Yeah, there's with the internship, it's now illegal. So I think with Viacom, where I was working, they ended up getting sued years later. And they were for not paying interns, and there were laws that got instituted that changed a lot of that. So like the programs and stuff that I went through I think are not the same today. And some people sued and got like back pay, I think. So it was like peak, like 2008. So it was like peak, like you should be grateful to be in New York. You should be grateful to be doing this internship. It was like peak, like media being seen as like really cool or whatever. Girls was on HBO, it was like, or whenever Girls came out afterwards, it was very, when did Girls come out? It was like,
I'm like, I remember, I feel like I just finished university when
2012. Okay. So 2012. Yeah. So I was living in New York solidly. And like, there was this idea of like the glamour of being an intern or being an assistant or working your way up, living in a shitty apartment. But then they weren't really shitty because on TV they're not. But
no, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, but it was very, it was like shameful if you couldn't do those things. And so I really wanted to do all of that, and I thought that was the key to succeeding. And I also it was the height of The Daily Show, which is where I did my internship. I was extremely obsessed with it. I had written like an essay in high school about how I wanted to have my own Daily Show type show that had gotten into like best teen writers of 2006 or whatever it was. That's called Authors of Tomorrow. You can find it still. It's very embarrassing. This was like a dream job, but they were not going to pay anything. And so I went to New York and I just blew through everything I had made that year. And I just wasn't prepared for it at all. And I ended up, I like.
Do you regret doing it? Like, are you glad that you went through it? Or because I know part of you talking about the book, you don't know if it could have helped your career, or maybe it wasn't even an element. You'll never know.
I will never know, but I do think people saw The Daily Show on my resume and got excited. I think so. I mean, I think, it's interesting now, like I worked on a show for Netflix, and I've done a bunch of other things, but a lot of times when people are like, what have you done? And I list stuff, when I list that show, people are like, whoa. And that's like something I did for like 8 months in 2018. You know what I mean? Like that's not even a blip in my career. So I think like it's unfortunate that these big name things sort of do latch on, people latch on to them and then they give you credibility, even though it's like not necessarily my biggest job. So that was the lure, right? Is that they could say that and I could be like, well, I have to work here. I have to work here for free. I have to. And I was like, I mean, I talk about in the book, I had like no clothes for the job, really. I was like, shoplifted from Urban Outfitters, which I guess I still stand by, but that was not great. And like just had I tried to sell a bunch of stuff, and I think I like pawned some stuff that I really wish I hadn't, but I like go through that I mean, I don't know if it's bipolar disorder or if it's scarcity mindset or trauma or what, but every so often I think, I don't know if it's a manic episode, but I do sell everything I own periodically.
That might be. Like, I don't know if I've ever done that before.
Yeah,
so.
I get really nervous about not having enough money. And it does happen, obviously, like we alluded to my situation now, my quote unquote divorce, which has fucked me up heavily financially. And so, like I would like go through phases where I would sell all my books, or I would sell, sell all my, like, I'd be like, what do I need this table for? Sell it. Or so like there was, you know, things in New York, and then there's the scene that I write about where I'm trying to sell my it was like a thing that an alarm clock
like
that was
iPod
also an
speakers or something,
iPod.
or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like walking through New York and it was really hot. And I was walking to the pawn shop and the bag broke and the speakers fell on the sidewalk and broke. And I just, that like broke me.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, that sounds like like an episode of a show.
Yeah.
Just like, come on.
And I just like cried because,
Yeah.
I mean, still to this day, the thing I cry about most is money, for sure. Number one.
Yeah. So even now, like you, and I know you kind of touched on this in the book too. And this is, I think, a big problem we see is you see the outward facing, like looking at your resume and just like, you have a Wikipedia page for God's sakes, and it has all these amazing things. And so from the outside, people are like, oh, and you have like all these followers and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily equate to wealth having all of these things listed. And I think a lot of people, especially when you're on like social media or stuff, and you see someone has you know, a lot of followers, like I feel like I was watching something and I was talking about that. It's like, oh, you assume this person has 200,000 followers on Instagram, they have a lot of money, and they're like, no they don't. And that's kind of the problem, because then it's harder for you to talk about. Oh yeah, you talked about in the book where, you know, you can get you were doing, what was it, the one where we don't have that in Canada, but it's like you deliver people's
Postmates
food or something. Postmates, yeah, we don't have Postmates here, but you were doing that to make some extra money, and then the fan saw you on the street. They're like, "Hey, can I get a photo?" And you're like, "Oh my God, I may not make money from Postmates if I'm late." And that's the reality. I think people get this idea that if you got some fame, that you're doing okay, and you're like, "No, we all got." You know, shit going on.
Yeah, and people come from different financial situations. My co-host, who I did a lot of stuff with, she's very transparent about her family being wealthy, which I do appreciate. And we would get paid the exact same thing. Let's say we'd both get $50K for something. Mine would pay off a student loan, and she would get to keep hers.
Yeah. And you're like, so this is how you are easy. You know, it's easier for you to build your own wealth compared to me, because I'm starting under 50K. Like I'm in debt and you are starting in the black.
Which is fine.
I want to talk. Yeah, which is fine.
But it's a reality.
That's the reality. And that's also why it frustrates when people were like, just work harder or just do this, X, Y, Z. And you're like, we're not starting in the same place. But I want to talk about that 50K, because you mentioned in your book that was life-changing money. And I think a lot of us, especially, you know, if you're a bit older, I'm reaching 40. There's been a couple times in my life where it's like that changed everything. Like I always earned very little at all my corporate jobs, but then I got this one job and it was like $15,000 more than I was earning. And literally remember calling my husband and being like, you won't believe, and my salary was $56,000 in this new job. I'm like, you'll never believe how much I'm earning. And he's like, we're rich.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was life-changing, because before that I was earning like $30,000 or $40,000 and just really, really just having a rough time of it. And for you were able to sell a pilot of a show, which is so cool, and you got $50,000, and you're like, that changed things. Do you want to kind of talk about what that experience was like?
Yeah, I mean, Alice and I sold a show. It's funny because it's like, oh, you sold a show or you sold a book, but the money gets doled out over a year, so it actually kind of ends up being like a $50K salary, actually. So like it gets doled out over the course of like, you know, the time or whatever. But yeah, it was huge. I paid off my student loans. And I think I started a little retirement at that time, maybe. And that was like, you know, I think getting out of debt was like a huge thing. Not that it's been like smooth sailing or whatever, like, you know, obviously things go back and forth. But that was like a start to being able to have more than just like $50 in my bank account at a time. And I didn't really have guidance around it. So I think what happened was like lifestyle creep, where I moved, I went fucking Great Gatsby. Like I moved, I started throwing parties. Like it was so like, what? Like, I just felt like, I don't know. I felt like I wanted to, like, I was like, now I can have a better life. So I want to have a better life. But like, I didn't think about saving or I didn't even know what investing was. I really never even thought about it. yeah, I just kind of wanted the things that other people had. And I wanted.
That's normal. That's literally everybody ever. Like, we look at people all the time and we're comparing ourselves and we just want better things.
Well, it's interesting. Like,
social
media is hard because I think things are not real. And as you said, like, there was that guy who was talking about how he was on the red carpet for being in The Bear, that show The Bear.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that he was on the red carpet for being in The Bear and he didn't have like $20.
Which character was that?
I can't remember. It was a thing where he was talking about the strike.
Okay.
The Bear actor, no money. Was that what I should Google?
That makes me sad that that's a Google.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, a writer for The Bear. Sorry, a writer for The Bear. Oh, you know what?
I feel like I saw that. I think it was, I read that or I saw that online or something about it. It's like, you think that the successful show, and I think The Bear is an incredible show. I love it so much.
Right.
And you'd think everyone would profit off it and do well. And it's like, nope.
No, it's a writer, Alex O'Keefe, who wrote for The Bear. He was like on the red carpet for The Bear and he didn't have he was living below the poverty line. And so I think there's like a lot of stuff where like you can see these photos. I'm seeing it now. It's kind of interesting. My feed is almost entirely people who are at New York Fashion Week. And I'm wondering if any of them have money. Does that make sense? Like, I keep looking and being like,
some of these influencers or whoever's going to New York Fashion Week and they're like, that's got to be expensive, especially you have to dress up and all that stuff.
I'm like, maybe I could go. Like, is it better? Here's my thing, Jessica.
Yeah.
Is it better for me to have pretended and not done the podcast episode where I talked about what's going on with me financially? Is it better for me to pretend and to get some clothes and go to New York Fashion Week and take the photos and be an influencer and show those and then people think I'm successful and then they give me more jobs? Or is it better for me to be honest, not do that, and quote unquote fake it till you make it, which I did a lot in my beginning of my career? Is it better to not do that and to just like be honest about what's going on? Because I'm mostly embarrassed. I would rather be posting from New York Fashion Week.
Sure. Who wouldn't? But no, I think there's a couple of things there. It's like, on the one side, it's like, you're like, well, financially, maybe it would be better. Like, maybe this is an investment if I, fake it, go to New York Fashion Week and stuff, and I can get more jobs. And then maybe I can bridge that gap with that money. So it's true. Yeah. But I feel like in the grand scheme of things, the best thing you could do, especially for your audience who follow you and are like looking to you as someone that they can really trust, it's always better to be honest, even if it means leaving money on the table. Like, I know, well, I don't know this, but I believe part of the reason that I'm probably not as wealthy or as successful, outward facing as I could be is because I say no to a lot of things that ethically just do not jive with me. And part of that is like, I don't talk about how much, I'm honest, but I also keep certain things private. And part of that too is just like respecting my partner, who's like, I work in music. I work with a lot of people that do not earn a lot of income. And it just is awkward if you talk about our financial situation, no matter what it is. I just don't want people to know our business because he wants to also, be just
have control over how
have
he's
some boundaries. Yeah, exactly. He just doesn't want people to know, all of our details, and I totally respect that. But I try to be as honest as possible and say no to a lot of things. And I think it was really I don't think you should be embarrassed. I think it's really brave for you to be that honest about your situation. Because for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We don't hear enough of this. All I see on my feed is people being like, I made $100,000 this month, and I'm like, so that makes me feel like crap. Whereas yours, I'm like, I feel seen, and I feel like so many other people feel seen. And that is how you can start to make change in your life. If you feel like, oh, I have a similar situation, well, I'm going to follow you and see where you go. And I'm sure it's going to end up in some situation, maybe not how exactly you want it, but it's going to end okay. And you're going to thrive after because you've proven so many times, you've, faced so many difficulties, and you always come out on the other side. So I think that is a better message to get across for yourself ethically, but also just to your audience. So I think it's a wonderful thing.
Maybe I appreciate it. I think sometimes
you're just going through it right now, so it's hard to see it.
I think sometimes I look at stuff and I go, well, the bad guys win. Like life isn't fair. Like a lot of people monetarily, they do everything right and they still end up in a car accident. They still end up, something, anything, addiction, anything, like stuff that people go, well, that's your fault. Like, anything that like it's not fair. Like life happens to people in a way that is just exceedingly unfair.
Absolutely. It's not about just making choices and doing the right thing and working hard. It's not. It's like some people will just always have a tougher time and never be able to reach some of those heights that other people are a lot more easily because of circumstance, because of generational wealth and all these things that are, you can't control. And it sucks. I mean, it bugs me that, what was it, the Amazon guy or whatever, he has like a $500 million yacht.
Yeah.
I'm like, if this person had more of a moral compass, it maybe he'd realize instead he could donate $500 million and change the world. But he wants a yacht, and there's nothing I can do about it.
And in the U.S., things are not set up well. If, for example, we had an episode that came out today with a debt lawyer, and she was talking about how like they have to like negotiate to get things forgiven and stuff. And she was like, well, it's up to the creditors and we don't know how they make their decisions. And I have people that are like she was like, I have a client that both kids have cancer. And the creditors are like, too bad, so sad. Like there's like not really hardship. Like there's not the same sort of like hardship forgiveness as you would think.
No. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the big problem in a capitalist society. It's all about money first, everything else second.
And what do these companies need their money for? Like, what do these credit card companies
Shareholders.
need? Oh, whatever.
Shareholders. Shareholders, dividends, which always drives me crazy when I see all these like dividend investor being like, this is great. I'm like, it's a lot more complex than that. And this is how, anyways, that's a whole other story. One other thing I really wanted, or two other things I really, really wanted to talk about, where number one, you did mention your bipolar disorder. This is something that also is not talked about enough in the personal finance spaces. If you have some mental health issue or even like a chronic illness or anything, that is going to make things more difficult for you. And it is never talked about. People just assume, oh no, everyone's, fine. I'm like, well, I've been doing a lot of research for my book. Everyone has something.
Yeah.
Everyone's got something. But how has that affected you? And what have you been able to do once you were diagnosed to recognize, oh, maybe I'm acting in a certain way and this is not going to help me if I make this financial decision?
That's my favorite chapter in the book because I talk about the breakdowns that I've had and flying to Paris, which I guess is a thing that people with bipolar disorder love to do, is fly to Paris.
Just Paris?
Yeah, there's something about Paris
Really?
where like so many people with bipolar disorder are like, I flew to Paris. Like, I don't know what it is. People with mental illness love Paris. So, it's romantic.
Paris is nice.
Yeah, it's romantic.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I get it.
And so like, I think getting diagnosed helps me look at whether behaviors are based in reality or not. Like, do I actually need this? Can I slow down? Can I, am I going to really do this? But it's scary because sometimes I do have ambitions and things that I want to do. And I go, is this real? Which is really hard to grapple with. Is this real? Is this something that is going to be a problem in the long run? Like, I'm trying to get this movie made. And it's like, is that, am I being crazy? Am I being delusional? Is that real? And then it's like, you have to.
Yeah. Like, are some of the risks you took to succeed in your career?
Were they real?
They're real, but your ambition or was it your bipolar that made like, you can do this?
And like, does it matter? And were they, if they didn't shake out financially, were they worth it because of getting me to somewhere? Like, I'm not very good at, I always say this and people say that's not true, that I'm not very good at being strategic. Like, I just have never had whatever people have where they can move through the world in a non-emotional way to sort of get things.
But sometimes that doesn't work. I'm very strategic and I'm like, I wish I took more risks. I wish I did, I wasn't too analytical because then when you analyze too much, then you don't do anything.
Yeah, that's true. But sometimes it's like, I needed to stop and do things in a more methodical way. Like every day I want to go on TikTok and just like start problems and I have to just not. And that's hard. And like, I've made bad decisions because I've had poor impulse control. And that sucks. And there's not really any way to like get that back or come back from that in some ways. Like you just have to.
So how do you manage that on a day-to-day basis? Is it just like something like an active practice you have to do just to be mindful.
Yeah. It sucks. It's hard. It's like not.
Yeah, it does suck.
Yeah. It's not fun. It's not great. Like I'm medicated. But like, it's not like I've talked about this a lot, but people think that if you're medicated for something, then you've, you just stop having the problems. But
yeah, like it's a cure. You're like, no, it's not a cure.
With bipolar disorder, I describe it as like a train, and the train is barreling and it wants to go down one track. And normally, if I wasn't medicated, it would just go. But what the medication does is give me the 5 seconds to pull the lever. And it's not as though I'm not having the thoughts. It's not as though I don't want the train to go. It's not as though like I'm not like living a blissful whatever. I'm like just have the ability to pull the lever. And that's like gives me time to like live life productively or live life whatever in a way that isn't distressing to me. Do I always get to the lever in time? No. And is like, so it's still fighting with your own head. It's not like, everything goes away, which I found interesting. Like when I spoke to people with schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia, that I even assumed I was like, well, if you're medicated, you don't see things anymore. And my friend was like, no, you still see things. You just know they're not real. And I was like, cool for everyone. Cool.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, again, like that is not something anyone talks about because a lot of, as we've becoming a society more aware of mental health, no one talks about how that could affect your bottom line. Of course it can. Of course, every decision that we make, has some semblance of some effect on your financial life. And so how could that not affect that going forward?
I mean, I got started seeing a therapist for autism a year and a half ago. What is time? And and that I think is factored into a lot of stuff too, because I think with my current situation with my breakup, I think I was very trusting in a lot of ways because I've had a lot of problems in my life surrounding the idea that, well, I'm a good person and I don't have bad intentions. So why would anyone else? Which has been a problem.
Which is sad that that's a problem because that's how we should look at our fellow human. It's like, I'm good. I'm going to make the assumption off the bat that you were good unless you show me otherwise. But sometimes it's too far down. You're too far down, you know, the road to find out, maybe
well,
not.
I go, well, why would I? Like if I wasn't going to do that to someone, why would they do that to me?
Why would someone else?
But it's like it just leads to being taken advantage of, I think. Yeah.
It's a cruel world.
I know.
It's a cruel world. The last thing I really wanted to touch on, and I think this is, something I've definitely never talked about on the podcast, but I think is important is, you have transitioned. You're Gabe. When you came out with the book, originally you were Gabby. And that, again, is something that, I actually have a cousin who's trans, and something that I always kind of thought about was like the financial side of things. No one really talks about that. Like, obviously, it's a whole big conversation, but just talking about the financial side of things, if that's something that you're like, this is what I want to do, there's not a lot of support, whether you're in Canada or the US, not a lot of financial support if that's something that you want to move forward with. And so did you want to kind of talk about, I did a little research just on the Canadian side to be like, what is covered and isn't? Most things just aren't, even though we have technically universal health care. In the US, what's it look like? If you want to start doing the process, what are some like figures that people should have in mind?
It's interesting because my top surgery was covered for health insurance. I had to go and get like diagnosed with like gender dysphoria, but like it's interesting because I've been keeping track a lot more of like DIY transition stuff. So like people who have been saying like, hey, if you're not going to be able to get hormones in your state, you can order them here. And then it's like, okay. I'm not saying you should, but this is an information or like, and it's kind of hearkening back to like early days of or like people transitioning in times before trans people were really visible, where it's this like helping each other sort of Underground Railroad type thing of like, hey, this is the doctor that'll let you do this. Hey, this doctor does top surgery for this, thing. Or like people really like coming together and sort of taking care of each other or helping each other. Or if somebody gets a surgery, helping them, or like, so you don't have to pay for as much, care or whatever. I mean, I went to the store, I bought like $300 worth of like bandages and stuff, which I did like end up needing. But it was like, other people came through and said, oh, when I had top surgery, I used this thing for my seatbelt. That was really helpful. It gave me that. Or, so there's been a lot more of like a community coming together that I think was always there, but now is like more visible from social media.
Definitely.
And so, my top surgery it was like $10K. It was covered by health insurance. Maybe a little more, I don't know. And then, I'm dealing with losing my insurance through WGA because of the strike. And so when I lose that, one of the considerations was, well, I want to be able to stay with my gender affirming care doctor, but does that mean that I'm going to have a higher, payment per month? Could I go see a doctor who's a little further away for gender affirming care? But how would that time out with gas versus paying so it's like it dovetails with healthcare being very unfair and untenable in the US. But I mean, it depends on what you want to do. Like my testosterone is covered I get it for like $12. But
great.
there was a thing where it was like I had to wait like 7 weeks for it to get approved, and it was a whole rigmarole. And they were like, we can give it to you now for $700. And I was like very tempted.
Yeah,
and then I was like, no. And then I made a series of TikToks crying about it. But yeah, it was just like, and I was sort of like baffled where I was like, you could just give this to me. Why just give it to me? But like they can't. And then, there's different doctors at different pharmacies or different pharmacists. Like, I needed a certain type of needle, and it wasn't prescribed or blah, blah, blah. And this one pharmacist was like, just handed them to me and was like, go. And like, it's just, like depends on who you're talking to. With name change stuff, that was like some paperwork. It cost me about like $625, I think, to change my name.
Like $625?
Yeah. And to get the 3 certified copies. So it was like 4 something to change the name, and then $150 for the certified copies, $50 each. And then I had to go to the banks and get that changed. Bank of America did it, no problem, super easy. There's certain things that are funny, like Bank of America did it, no problem. Marriott Bonvoy is giving me a hard time. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's
for your like Bonvoy rewards.
Yeah,
you're like, why
they
is this
like
a
won't
big
let
deal?
you change your name. Like, it's like a whole thing. So it's super funny.
Ridiculous.
Like who you, and then also it really depends on who you get. Like I went to the Social Security office to get a new Social Security card, and I was in line, and I knew that if it timed out that I got the young woman, I would be okay. Versus I didn't know about these other people, so it timed out that I did end up getting the woman the young woman at her window, and I knew as soon as she looked at the paperwork and looked up and she was like, "Hey, congratulations!" I was like, "All right, this is going to be smooth sailing." But it's you never know.
But that's something I have to worry about. It's like, who am I going to get on the phone or at the checkout or whatever?
I went to the DMV to get all of that changed the day after there was that shooting where the shooter was a trans guy, allegedly. And I went to the DMV and I was like in line, and it occurred to me like, ooh, I should have gone a different day. Because I don't know what these people are thinking. I don't know what news they've taken in. I don't know. It ended up being fine because I got a really nice, the first time I got someone who turned me away, and I had to go to the Social Security office first, which was fine. And then I came back. Those are the rules. But also there could have been someone who would have been like, whatever. And then when I got back, I had another woman, and she was very much like, oh, this is so exciting. And was like positive. So
that's got to be really difficult not knowing what you're going to get in terms of someone being like, oh, this is great. Or someone being like, I'm going to make this really difficult for you.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's already difficult.
Yeah. We don't know. You don't know. And they might not understand initially what's happening. Like they're like, oh, you're changing your, and then they like don't really know. But I did change my gender marker too. So I think most people understood what was happening. But yeah, it's just a lot of, little things.
Yeah. Do you think about how, I especially being a woman transitioning to a man, do you ever worry about, is this going to impact my financial future, my earning potential?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are people going to look at me differently?
Of course. Yeah? It absolutely has. Of course. There's tons of, you get, I don't even know where to start. Like, hey, best finance books by women list on Forbes or whatever, right? I'm not on that list anymore. Or brands that I've worked with in the past, I see them still working with other people for like female empowerment, financial, which like I totally understand. Even like a sex toy company that worked with me is like hasn't reached out, and I'm like, that's interesting. Like, it's like great, but like it's funny because there's never going to be a list that's like best trans books about finance
or something so niche like best personal finance books by trans authors. You're like, we're not at that stage yet where there's enough.
That's exactly. And there's people who I think there was like a jarring situation with my following, which they really, they felt some of them were going through a similar thing or felt seen. Other people were like, you were this feminist voice and now you're, like,
you could still be a feminist.
Well, yeah, it's just,
but yeah, they had this idea of you and they're like, I'm confused.
Yeah. The brand is not consistent. So it was not, I would say it was not people think like I remember someone saying like, oh, now you're going to get so many jobs. And I was like, that is a falsehood that you have been sold.
Because you're becoming a man?
No, because people want diversity. And I was like,
ooh, that's gross. That's such a gross thing to say.
That has not been the case at all. Like it's not gonna, some movies don't play in certain countries because there's a trans actor in them.
Yeah.
So it was not a good business decision.
But hopefully I hope, the stuff we're talking about won't be much of an issue in the future, but it's it's just even, you mentioning like when they list books, they are gendered, like maybe you don't really see any lists about best books by men anymore, but you do see them about women. And it's funny too, because it's like, even being a woman, I hate how things are so gendered because I've just been fighting as a feminist. I've been fighting my whole life. I'm like, I'm more than a woman. I'm actually like just good at fighting. Like whenever I meet someone new, they're like, oh, so you teach women about money? I'm like, no, I just happen to be one.
Right.
It drives me crazy.
Right.
Like, why could I only teach women about money? Because I'm a woman and I teach pink finance. Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's that.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But I hope we do, because you still have an amazing voice. And that's insane to me that,
Thanks.
People would have a problem with that. But
I don't want to discourage anyone from transitioning, but it is definitely an interesting new world.
Yeah, I worried about that with my cousin. She's young, so she still has, many years, but I was just like, I was really worried. I'm like, is she going to have a difficult time finding work now?
Yeah.
Because,
it could be still, they're not like allowed to discriminate, but they still kind of are.
They still do. They say they're not supposed to do that on race, and they do. So.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. Well, I appreciate you being so candid and honest about that, because I think, again, people listening, they don't hear this often on, podcasts, but especially personal finance podcasts. And I think it's really, really important for us to talk about some of these things. So I don't want to keep you much longer. But again, I know you have the book Bad with Money. You have another book. You have a couple books. You're also a New York Times bestseller, which is you have, again, the craziest resume. Do you want to kind of share anything else that you have that people can check out? And then also, where can people find you? You have an amazing YouTube channel, amazing podcast.
Yeah, I have a podcast with my friend Allison. We do Just Between Us.
I love it.
Then I have Bad with Money, which is my finance show. And I also have a trans guy podcast called The New Guys, KNEW, with my friend River Butcher.
That's a great name.
Thank you. The second book that came out was called Stimulus Rec, and it was through Scribd, and that was super fun. It was like an update to Bad with Money based on the pandemic. And so, I'm kind of all over the place. I'm on Instagram at Gabe S. Dunn. that's like where you can find everything.
And of course, your TikTok. That's another place that
Dabby Gun, yeah, which I'm not allowed to change because I'll lose my blue check. So got to figure out what to do about that too.
There's got to be someone, that's the frustrating thing. Is like there's got to be somebody you can talk to.
Yeah,
like it's ridiculous.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, thanks again for joining me on the podcast. It was such a treat having you on. So
thank you.
And that was episode 374 of the More Money Podcast with Gabe Dunn. Make sure to check them out. All of their many things just between us, podcast and YouTube channel, the New Guys podcast, and also Bad with Money, the podcast. And make sure to grab copies of I Hate Everyone But You and Bad with Money. And don't forget to follow Gabe on TikTok and Instagram, everywhere you can find. I'm going to link everything to make it really easy for you in the show notes for this episode, jessicamorehouse.com/374. And if you need a reminder about where you can find information about any episode I've ever released, all you have to do is go to my website, jessicamorehouse.com/podcast. And if you know the particular, episode number, and all of them, I think, come with episode numbers, they should anyway, just go to jessicamorehouse.com/ whatever the number of that episode is. And if ever you cannot find an episode, you're like, there's this episode with this person about this topic, I can't remember. Honestly, I don't mind getting an email or a DM. I get those all the time. And because I've been doing this for so long, I remember every single guest, every single topic, and I will be able to tell you in 2 seconds to save you a little Google. I don't mind. And also, it's a nice way to say, hey, I like the podcast so much that I'm trying to find this episode to share it with somebody that I really like, or something like that. I don't know. I will also be giving away a copy of Gabe's book, Bad with Money. So, just keep on listening for some more information about that. But before I get to that and give you a little life update, because I have not talked to you for several months, I just have a few things that I want to share with you that you may not know about. Do you want to figure out where your money is going? Do you want to organize your finances once and for all? Do you want to feel less anxious about your money? Well, I have a great tool for you. My collection of budget spreadsheets, which you can find at jessicamorehouse.com/shop. These new and improved budget spreadsheets have helped thousands of people over the years, and these are honestly the budget spreadsheets that me and my husband still use today. They come in Google Sheets and Excel. They also come with a comprehensive video tutorial to show you exactly how it works, and they're very easy to use. Not only that, I've got versions for pretty much any scenario. So if you're an employee, I've got a budget spreadsheet for that. If you are self-employed, I've got a budget spreadsheet for that. If you're in a couple and one of you is an employee and one of you is self-employed, I've got a budget spreadsheet for that. I've got 7 different budget spreadsheets for any kind of situation. So no matter what's going on in your life and your income, I've got a budget spreadsheet for you. So if you want to take action and see some progress with your finances, this is one really easy step that you can take right after listening to this episode. Just go to jessicamorehouse.com/shop, find the right budget spreadsheet for you, and then start making some moves that future you will be really, really thankful for. Okay. So first things first, if you want to enter to win a copy of Gabe's book, Bad with Money, just go to jessicamorehouse.com/contest is where you can find that. This is kind of an exclusive contest for podcast listeners, because you can't find it on my website unless you know the link. You can't find it. And it's funny because I feel like I don't know, maybe it was like a autofill or whatever. Maybe I was Googling myself. And one of the autofills was Jessica Morehouse contest. I'm like, I don't think you'll find that link. You have to go to the URL. And it's really just this contest really is for listeners who want to support me, but also I want to support you and your financial, journey and literacy. And also, they're all authors that have been on the show. So jessicamorehouse.com/contest is where you can find all that information. Also, just want to give you a reminder. I also have a YouTube channel. Just, Google Jessica Morehouse in YouTube. You'll find me right there. I think that's just what my YouTube channel is called, Jessica Morehouse. I'm also on the gram, Instagram. No one calls it the gram anymore. Instagram. I don't know if they ever did. And I am at Jessica I Morehouse. The podcast also has its own Instagram account, which I am trying to be more active on, at More Money Podcast. And Twitter, exploded, and I no longer really use X, Twitter, whatever the hell it is. I guess I'll probably keep on, just out of habit for all these years. Gosh, I've been on there for like a decade or something. I'll probably keep on, posting some news things, or whenever I'm on the news, or when I have a podcast episode. But I'm just not. I don't love it. I am on Threads though, I also don't love it. I'm getting used to it. I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. Instagram is what I'm really leaning into because listen, so yeah, let me get to the life update. Still writing this book. I am more than halfway done, but I am nowhere near done because it feels like it's never going to end. And I'm enjoying the process, but I'm also hating it. And apparently that is very normal for writing at least your first book. Or I don't know, I've talked to lots of authors who have multiple books and they hate and love the process as well. And, you know, I know I'm in a very privileged position to be able to write a book. Like I'm so lucky and I know I'm so lucky, but also it still doesn't take away the, you know, mental anguish and all the self-doubt and just like all the negative thoughts that just, you know, go into my head being like, what are you doing? Who said you were an author? You know, normal stuff that we all deal with, imposter syndrome, all that good stuff. But things are going well. Thank you for asking. Yeah, the book is going well. For anyone who's, you know, wondering what's going on. So I have until the end of January to hand in my full manuscript, and I've created a schedule. I feel like I made an Instagram reel. It's actually pinned on my Instagram right now that you can find that kind of shares my book writing process a little bit. Got a little spreadsheet because why wouldn't I? And I'm basically writing one chapter a month. And so far that kind of sequence is working for me. But as you know, time is ticking, and especially fall is always really busy for me work-wise, which again, not complaining, very privileged to be working. Thank you so much. I need to pay my bills. Mortgage is very expensive. It's just, you know, it's terrifying that I literally have nightmares. Just like when you're in school and you're like, oh my gosh, forgot to hand in that paper. I am terrified of not meeting my deadline. I know I will because I am very good under pressure, but I also am worried that Jessica will, yes, me in the third person, I will just wait until the last week to write 2 chapters. I'm not going to let that happen, but I'm terrified that it'll accidentally happen. It won't happen, but it might. I don't know. So yeah, book writing is good. Thanks. But yeah, trying to focus more on doing Instagram because I'm just not a natural at it. And I'm just like, just do it and just don't care what people think because I'm very, I care about what people think because I am human, but I'm just going to do it more because honestly, part of the game that I've been talking to authors too is it's not just about writing a book or a good book. It's about selling the book. And I already hate talking about marketing now, but honestly, I'm terrified about that process too. I've just heard so much bad stuff about the process. It's really bad for authors. They really have to do it all. And so the authors that you see that are like, oh, I sold so many books, is because they have a big audience or, big social media reach and stuff like that. So I guess I have to focus more on Instagram. But if it was just up to me, I would just do the podcast and live in the woods. That's what I just want to do. I don't want to do Instagram, but I have to because I have to work to make a living. And that's just life. That's just life, and that's okay. Anyways, I've been rambling. I am so sorry. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me again for another season of the podcast. Like I said, I have so many amazing guests coming on the show. Let me tease who is going to be on the podcast next week. We have Eleanor Tucker. She is the author of Thanks for Sharing. She's British. Yes, I love everything about the UK. And so I read her book over the summer and just about the sharing economy. It was so awesome. And it's very much about, again, her, she did all these different things to figure out how to do get things for free or secondhand for an entire year. And it was so inspirational and so entertaining to read. She was a great writer. And so I got her on the podcast and that was very exciting. And you're going to love that episode. So that is coming next Wednesday. So yeah, look out for that. But that is it for me. Thank you so much to my podcast editor, Matt Rideout. He was nice enough in June when we were wrapping up the season to send me a gift because he also knows me because he listens to my voice and all of my mistakes that he edits out. But he sent me a cookbook because he knows I love baking and I talk about it on the podcast to celebrate 100 episodes together. And which is crazy because that's a good chunk of all my episodes. We're at 375. Gosh, look at that. So thanks, Matt, for the cookbook, and shout out to you for being amazing as always. But yeah, that is it for me. Have a good rest of your week, and I will see you back here with a fresh new episode of the More Money Podcast next Wednesday.